Hello everyone, welcome back to Blaze Vision. I'm your host Sid Blaze, and this is Painting with Acrylics Part 2. What I'm doing here is laying down a grayscale foundation on top of a primed canvas. This grayscale will serve not only as a guide, but the underbase for the painting that we'll be proceeding on. Now this is the painting I'm actually working on. It was a digital art piece that I did several years ago. I'm taking a lot of work that I've done digitally and recreating them on canvas for my own personal reasons. I just like the way canvas looks. It has a longer life as far as its presence. Digital art is cool, but there's just something about the organic feel of a canvas that I prefer in my latter years. So we're going to focus on the glass in the lower left-hand corner. And something I want to point out here just quickly, this going back to the digital world, you'll notice these color bars off to the right. And what it is, these are eye drops of the color within the painting. And this is where I use computer still. You know, I'm not going to knock computers totally. This is where I use computer still to help me out in even creating a painting. And by taking the eyedrop tool and hitting, specific points, I can then see actually what the color is. Sometimes you look at these pieces and colors again are muted and you really, it's kind of hard to tell what's what. So I will then use the eyedrop tool on those areas and create a color swatch. And it's these color swatches that I will mix my paints from. Now, I will, alter it slightly because, again, sometimes what you see in a photograph does not translate well to an actual painting. So, to keep it from either getting murky or trying to make the painting more vibrant, I will mix the colors in accordance to what I want to do or what I want to get across. So you'll see how these colors, the earth tone colors, are pretty much matched with the colors in my egg carton here. And that's just a tip. It's just one more tip to share with you how I get to where I want to be as far as even selecting my colors and then mixing them. All right, cool, let's do this. Okay, now when I started painting, and I showed it in the time lapse footage, that I start off with just doing a black and white, or should I say grayscale rendering. Normally, I also like to start with what's ever in the background first and work up to the foreground. It's easier to keep my edges clean that way because I could paint, not be sloppy, but I could be more liberal with the background painting and the shading and so forth. And then when I come back on top of that with the object that's in the forefront, the edge is cleaner. I just have to make sure when I'm doing that forefront image that I'm keeping my edge clean. With that, I'll be using a brush that's not, a large scale tip. I'll probably be using this brush, and I will wet it a little bit, and that will keep this paint smooth as I apply it to the canvas. My choice of paints, by the way, are heavy body paints. Any paint that says heavy body on it, it comes in either a jar or a tube. Is good to go. I like heavy body paints because but heavy body paints, you don't have to layer it as much. You don't, it doesn't streak. Some colors tend to streak. Blue, incidentally, tends to streak, but heavy body, it goes down pretty nice. If it doesn't say heavy body, it should at least say the word professional, and I'm talking about on the packaging of the paint. I stay away from student grade paints because they're inexpensive, but they're student grade for a reason. And that's why, again, my preference is heavy body paints. You could dilute them to the level that you want, but they can go down pretty opaque if you want to, and that's the point of it. So I'm going to start with the I would say the mid-tone, because the mid-tone is the color that we're going to apply color on top of. All right, we're going to apply the light colors on top of it as well as the dark. And by doing so, again, I'm just going to dip my brush in the water. I'm going to come in with my mid-tone paint color. I'm trying to choose between the two, but I think I'm going to go with this color that you're going to see me apply. And starting with the edge, and I want to make sure that, you know, this glass, when you're doing something that has like a geometric feel to it, it's got to be, you want to try to keep things, how should I say, equal. So whatever I'm doing on this side, I will be doing on the other side. Okay, and again, I'm just, you know, the paint here is pretty, I shouldn't say diluted, but it is, the brush is wet, and again, I want to keep the edge clean. If the paint was dry, it would leave a coarse edge, and I want to avoid doing that. So again, and also the reason why I'm diluting the paint just a little bit because I want it to be a little transparent. Because again, I want to see that black create that extra shadow. And when the paint dries, you'll see that. Now, when you're painting these edges, something that I try to avoid is having a ridge of paint build up there. So I will take my trusty finger, and you can't do it with the same finger twice, but I will come back and just get rid of that ridge of paint. Okay? And again, I could then come back with the brush just to okay, I just want to show you something real quick on how I, you know, work the paints as far as wetting my brush and dipping the paint and then getting off the excess. So you see my jars of water here. I'm going to use a clear jar just to show how I just tip the water in there, and I'll even dry it off a little bit. And like I said, this is how I use my rag and to just, you know, drying the brush off or getting off excess paint. I will take some red paint here because I had to do a quick little touch up on our background. And you'll see I may feel I have too much paint on there. Now, a lot of times what I'll do is actually wipe it back off onto the plastic. And in wiping just a little bit of paint off here on back to the carton, I could use this brush, do whatever, and come back and then still use a little bit more of this paint, so I'm not wasting it, totally wiping it away on the rag tablecloth. And then I proceed to paint. I feel like I have the right amount of paint I want to use to do what I want to do. And then I will proceed to use it. And then when I'm done, if I want to use this brush again, but for a different color in the same painting at the same time, I will just dip it in my first jar here, as much as I want, get as much off as I can, go back to my trusty rag tablecloth, wipe that off, and then go to my clear water. And you'll see the clear water will still basically stay clear because I got all the excess paint off of here. And now I'm ready to use this brush for another color on the glass. And again, I'm just coming in, you know, the brush, I haven't dipped it in water again because it was still wet. Still had, you know, a little wetness to it. But once I feel that wetness leaving, or once the edges start getting rough again, that's when I'll just dip it in water again. And you don't want the brush soaking wet. You just want it wet enough to make your edges smooth. Okay, so this is our blocked in brown, and I mix my blue color. It's kind of like a blue grayish color. And as I was talking about before, when mixing colors, ideally you don't want to mix more than two colors, but sometimes you have to in creating a color. So I have this muted kind of gray color going on. And what I did was I made it of blue and white. But then to give it that kind of off color, I had to add black to it. Now, normally, you know, when you do a mixing colors, there's an automatic ratio that you have with two colors. You might use, you know, two parts to one part, or you know, 4 parts to 6 parts, whatever, just proportion-wise. But when you add that third color, the proportions are changed, whereas the you might be adding more of the third color to the mix, or you might be adding less color. In this case, I had started with, like I said, blue and white, with just a smidgen of blue, if that's the right word to use, in the white paint, because you drop a little color in white, it goes a long way. And I ended up coming out with the lighter tone. But when I added the black to kind of dirty it up a little bit, I actually put in more black than I did blue. And that's just how sometimes it works out. Now I'm just, randomly smoothing stuff off with my fingers times, because again, I don't want an edge of paint. I want everything to be a smooth surface. If it was a textured painting, it wouldn't really matter, but this is not a textured painting, so I just want to keep things kind of clean. Again, I'm coming in with this smaller brush handle, or brush tip, so to speak, and it's just slightly diluted. And I'm making sure that my edges are clean against my background, because I really don't want to have to come and touch that up. Sometimes you have to, but if you can avoid it, that's a good thing. And again, I'm just coming in, with this color here to try to, block in everything so I could get to the fun part of shading and blending. I said in a previous video that, blending is kind of a challenge for me, and it is in some cases, especially large areas. But again, I really think that comes down to my impatience. And it's something that I am going to try to work out actually in this painting as we speak. So again, I'm coming in here, I'm just trying to keep this as smooth as I can be. And again, the brush is just slightly wet. It's not oversaturated, but it allows me to create a very smooth edge there, which I am more than satisfied with. And I can keep coming around. Again, the challenge of this painting is to all these elliptical areas is to try to make them as perfect as they can be. Every painting I do, for some reason or another, and it should be like this in life, but every painting I do is a challenge. See, I got just a little off there, but see, I'm not like really upset, because that is right against black, and it'll be easy for me to fix that. Okay, so I'll even just come back there again. Maybe I could fix it as is. Okay, so again, I'm just blocking in my final coloring of whatever I need to start dropping on color on top of. And that's pretty much it. Now, as I was working in time elapse, I saw a couple things I was doing, which I think I should just slow down for a minute to explain. And this is where I start doing a little bit of blending. Now, I want to create more highlights and hues in here. One way to do that is to come in with the paint slightly wet around the outlining areas, and then come in with my lighter color, where it's dry, and blend out into the wet areas where they make a blend. That's where I get a little impatient. What I'm doing is I'm painting on a dry area without, coming in with a wetter paint of this darker shade around here. But the brush is slightly wet, and I'm going to even take off a little more paint. And then I call this pushing the paint. Well, I'm really taking a paint that is wet to a degree, but as I further go out and out and out away from where I originally painted, it begins to thin out. And this is where, like I said, I'm pushing the paint. It's wet to a degree, but as I push it out further, it begins to dry out. And by drying out, there's just less paint on the brush. Now, something that happens when I'm doing this, you have to avoid is the paint getting blotchy. Blotchy in that certain areas are, you go over too many times, certain areas will have more paint than others, and then you don't have enough paint on your brush to keep pushing it. I hope I'm not getting too wonky, as they say. But what I'm basically doing is starting from the inside with just a dab of color, where I want it to be the purest that it is, and then just working it out. Again, this is against wet paint against a dry surface. And I'm just really working the paint until it runs out. Naturally, if I need more, I'll just put a little more on my brush, but still starting from that center point where I want it to be the purest of that color to where I fade it out. And you see here how it just, that's my way of fading. That's my most, how should I say, my favorite way of fading. Again, I could do it the other way by, painting wet paint, putting wet paint on top of wet paint, which is, I guess, closer to the oil painting way of doing it. But even that, with that way, you have to really, you have to work the paint more. It's actually more of a job, for me at least. But again, I'm not showing you guys how to do it, how to paint. I'm showing you how I do this. And if there's something that I'm doing here that you either agree or disagree with, you could take it, take it any way you want to take it. And I'm not saying that to be, to be short or anything. I'm just saying that I'm sharing something with you that is totally up to you how you want to how you want to apply it to what you're doing. And I'm just coming in here. I'm going by my reference piece. I'm not just making this stuff up. And there's certain areas that if I want to blend in more, like these highlights here, I really want them to blend in more. I don't want them to be so harsh. So I'm going to come back with the paint that I want to kind of dull that down. But I'm going to come back in with that highlight again. But I want the highlight to fade. I want it to seem natural. So a lot of times you may put a color down and it's not, the highlight you want. So what you do, you come in, you dull it up a little bit. Not dull it up, but you dull up its surroundings. So when you place it within there again, it will have that natural fade. And again, I'm pushing the paint here. This paint is really not, I'm painting on a surface that's basically dry, but with a wet paint. And I'm creating that blend by just extending the color that's on the tip of my brush. And I kind of like the way that's coming out. So I am going to, I just want to try something here because I'm on a roll. I'm on a roll. So I want to add highlights in here. Now again, I could have had these areas wet. And what happens is when you add a highlight in there, it will blend pretty quickly into the paint. Again, that's why I say, I make these comparisons with oil paint, and I'm not knocking oil paint at all. My only, drawback to using oil is dealing with the paint thinner, and that can really, breathing that stuff in is one thing, but again, I work at home, and my studio's at home, I say, and to have that smell permeating through the house is just, it'd be a bit much. And again, when I had kids, my kids were living with us and they were younger and so forth, I didn't really want them breathing that either. So, but other than that, if it wasn't for that, I'd probably be working in oils also. And again, these paints that I'm putting on here, again, I'm putting them on a dry surface, wet paint, dry surface. But when you block in so much, and you have that underlying color, so to speak, you're able to put color on top of it. A dry application of paint, which the paint is wet, but onto a dry surface, you could create blends. So using my blending technique of what I call pushing paint, I go back and forth between laying color down with traditional wet paint just to cover surfaces, and then when I come back and do my blends, I will do so with the dry brush technique. You'll see a quick flash. That is actually the hair dryer that I use to dry my surface, because again, I'm applying wet paint onto a dry background, and that allows me to, as I was doing before, to push the paint across. You see me giving highlights here. Again, everything is on a dry background. You'll see flashes of the dryer to dry that background before I paint on top of it. And that's basically it. That's how I do my blends and try to create a smooth blending of colors. And this is our progress so far. This painting is going to take a while to finish because there's just so much to do. I'm pretty content with the elliptical of this section of the glass. I may come back in and try to just smooth out a little more, corners a little bit more. And the top elliptical we got to do a lot of work on. And I'm going to show how I can correct that in our next video. Also to create the illusion of fluid or alcohol within the glass. Even the elliptical, even the curve within the glass is just not right. The liquor in the glass is just not right. So I'm going to fix all of that, show you how I do that, and bring it all together. So thank you very much. I shall return with part 3 of working in acrylics. Peace.